Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a new series. What are you listening to lately? WAYLTL. That's a common little, initially thing that we do here on various like chat groups and things like that. And I think we should have sort of a more free-for-all discussion sometimes of particular works, especially when it comes to interesting repertoire, but also standard stuff too. What do we listen to just for pleasure? What turns us on? What do we do when we're in a certain mood? This came to me, I recently came back from a trip to Europe. I went to Italy and Munich to see family and friends. And I was listening to a very interesting and beautiful symphony that's great when you're traveling. It's Charles Tournemire, Symphony Number 3, Moscow 1913, it's called, or subtitled, or just plain Moscow. It's a four-movement symphony that's absolutely haunting. In fact, it's one of the most it gets under your skin, haunting things you've ever heard. It's all based on Russian folk music and the bell sounds of Moscow at the time in question. And those bells are authentic, believe you me, because first of all, he uses bells, he uses chimes, he uses celesta and glockenspiels and all that stuff. But the actual melodies are going to be familiar. If you know, for example, the Rachmaninoff suites for two pianos, there's one of those bell things in the finale of the first suite. Da-da-dum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-da-da-da-dum, da-da-dum, da-da-dum. Well, that's in there. And a lot of other kind of, like the tune from Alexander Nevsky, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da by Prokofiev. Well, that's kind of in there. And it's much earlier. I mean, it's a wonderful portrait of, a Frenchman in Moscow, because the symphony is in strict Frankian form. I mean, boy, is this one of those cyclical form things. These same tunes and motives permeate the work. I mean, each movement has some original material, but the connecting material and the subsidiary material, that's all the same in all of these different movements. And so you get to hear, it's so unified. And, most of the music is very quiet, very mystical in a way, almost like Vaughan Williams' Pastoral Symphony, for example. It makes exquisite use of a pair of harps in a melodic way. I mean, it's beautifully scored. But one of the things, it's about half an hour long, 32 minutes. And one of the things that just really, really just blows me away is just how calming the whole work is. It makes you feel totally at peace with the universe. And it has a big heroic ending, by the way. It's not like, snoozeroonie at all. It doesn't put you to sleep. But the music, the tunes get under your skin. They're very, very catchy and primal sounding. The orchestration is just luminous all the way through. There's a certain spiritual quality to all of Tournemire's music because he was one of those, crazy French mystical organist people. And he wrote tons and tons of liturgical organ music, including L'Orgue Mystique, which is this enormous collection of organ pieces for all 51 weeks of the Catholic liturgical year. And it's got all that stuff in it. So he responded to that religious element, and that it's in all of his music. It's quite marvelous. He's almost like prototypical Messiaen in that sense, although rather more tonal. He was actually a fascinating composer. I mean, he wrote 8 symphonies with crazy titles, The Triumph of Death, that's the 8th. And his 7th is this Mahlerian extravaganza, The Dances of Life, in 5 movements. And he wrote an opera on Tristan and Isolde. And he did a trilogy on Faust, Don Quixote, and St. Francis of Assisi. I mean, I would love to hear some of these things. They're huge, huge, impressive canvases. And he was a very talented composer. He was a student of Franck, and he took over Franck's organ at Sainte Clotilde when Franck died, and he kept it till his death in 1939. So he was an important figure, and his music doesn't deserve to be dismissed. Now, there are 2 recordings of the Moscow Symphony, Symphony number 3. One of them is Antonio de Almeida and the Moscow Symphony Orchestra on Marco Polo, and the other is Pierre Bartholomé with the Liège Philharmonic, which you can download or stream. It's available that way. It was originally on Valois, then it got reissued when they got bought, and it was in that Liège box that I talked about. The performances are rather different. I prefer Almeida's for the tempos and Bartolomé's for the quality of the orchestra, the sonics. So, it's 6 in one, half dozen in the other. The couplings, if you had CDs, are also different because Bartolomé gives you the 7th, that big Dances of Life, and Almeida gives you the 8th, the Triumph of Death. So you get to choose. He was, I was very fortunate to be I was friends with Antonio de Almeida, and while he was making these recordings, I was able to sit with him and go through all these scores, which he had, which some of them were enormous. The 6th is a big choral extravaganza with the voice of Jesus, and okay. So, I kind of learned them that way before I even heard them, and they really are impressive and wonderful, wonderful works in that Frankian tradition. I don't know why they're so neglected. I think they're just impractical. A Tournemire often requires an organ. I mean, one's a big choral work, but an organ and some strange instruments and just like a mandolin in the 8th, I think, a la Mahler. In fact, he sometimes writes a la Mahler in his scores, although he didn't really care for Mahler that much, I don't think. I don't know. He was an interesting character. But the Third Symphony is an incredible piece. And both of these performances, Antonio de Almeida with the Moscow Symphony and Bartolomé with the Liège Philharmonic, and I have the pictures I'm showing you there, or showed you. I don't know how I'm going to edit this, but they're there, are available on YouTube, complete. And the Bartolomé, you can follow along with the manuscript score. I mean, so you can hear this all for yourself, but I really urge you to give it a listen. It really made my trip easier. The music is like a healing balm of gorgeous melody and bell sounds, and there's something sort of cosmic and Nirvana-like about the whole piece. It's like nothing else. It really isn't. And his other symphonies aren't really like that either. I mean, they're very interesting works, but this is a special piece, a special moment of spiritual repose that we could all use if we're taking a break from the hurly-burly of our daily lives, or if you're traveling. So keep on listening, friends. Give Tournemire's Third a try, and let me know what you're listening to lately. Maybe we'll talk about some of those pieces. Take care.